The silence of the pre-dawn airport is a sound only a select few ever get to hear. It's the hum of a sleeping giant, the quiet promise of journeys yet to begin. For most people, an airport is a place of transit, a bustling maze of terminals, check-in desks, and security lines. But for a trusted few, it's a second home. They're the people who make the system work, the ground crews, the cleaners, the security guards. And every day, their diligence and integrity are the invisible shield that protects millions. This is the story of a man who shattered that shield. He was a man named Junaed Dar, a senior security manager at London's Heathrow Airport. He was a pillar of the community, a person whose uniform and badge were a symbol of safety and trust. He had the keys to the kingdom, full airside clearance, access to secure zones, and a deep, intimate knowledge of the airport's blind spots and vulnerabilities. Every corner he turned, every door he unlocked, was a demonstration of the immense authority he held. But while the airport trusted him, Dar had already committed the ultimate betrayal. He was a cancer in the heart of the system, a double agent working for a criminal enterprise far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. On a cold December morning, as the city of London still slept, Dar arrived at the airport 3 hours before his shift. He wasn't there for an inspection or a security check. He was there for a rendezvous. His target was a single flight arriving from Bogota, Colombia. On board, 2 couriers, Michael Williams and Jessica Waldron, were smugly flying across the Atlantic. They believed their plan was foolproof, a masterclass in modern drug trafficking. Their checked luggage contained not clothes or personal items, but 22 kilograms of pure, high-purity cocaine, a fortune with a street value exceeding £2 million. They had been promised a flawless handover, a system so airtight it was, to them, untraceable. Their plan was simple. Once the plane landed, they would collect their bags and meet their insider, the very person who would use his position to bypass every single security layer. Dar would take the luggage and, using an official airport vehicle, smuggle the deadly cargo out of the airport and into the hands of the organized crime group waiting on the outside. It was a plan built on arrogance and a complete disregard for the safety of others. But this time, they weren't the only ones running an operation. In a stunning act of high-stakes deception, the National Crime Agency, NCA, was already one step ahead. They had been watching, listening, and gathering intelligence. They knew the flight number, the couriers, and the bag tags. But instead of simply seizing the drugs in Bogota and arresting the criminals there, the NCA chose a far more daring, a far more dangerous path. They decided to let the operation unfold. Before the plane even left Colombian airspace, a team of police officers working with the NCA intercepted the courier's luggage. They didn't confiscate the cocaine. In a breathtakingly bold move, they meticulously swapped every single block of the illicit drug with identical blocks of wood. Then, they sealed the bags and placed them back on the plane, allowing the couriers to fly across the ocean completely unaware that their deadly cargo was now nothing more than worthless lumber. It was a calculated risk, a high-stakes gamble that could expose every link in the criminal chain, from the couriers to the insider to the organizers themselves. If it failed, the drugs could have slipped through. If it succeeded, it would be the key to a historic takedown. So, how did the authorities gain such precise intelligence about the plan? What happened when Junaed Dar, the man who thought he had the ultimate advantage, was caught in the act, holding nothing but the cold, hard evidence of his own greed? And what does it say about airport security that a man in a position of such immense trust could turn out to be the greatest threat of all?
This man's life was built on routine and trust. For 47 years, he had been a fixture in the world of aviation, culminating in his role as a senior security manager at London's Heathrow Airport. This wasn't a job, it was a position of immense responsibility. Dar possessed an almost godlike level of access within the sprawling, intricate network of terminals and runways. He could move through the labyrinthine corridors with an official vehicle, a uniform, and the unspoken authority that comes with it. He knew the blind spots of the CCTV, the gaps in the patrols, and the quiet, forgotten corners where a transfer could go completely unnoticed. His knowledge was a professional asset, but to a criminal network, it was the key to an empire. For Dar, the badge was not a symbol of integrity, it was a shield for his greed. His co-conspirators were two couriers, Michael Williams and Jessica Waldron, a couple who had been recruited from the West Midlands. They were not masterminds, they were simply pieces on a chessboard, told what to do and where to go. Their journey began in Bogota, Colombia, a city that served as the nexus for a cross-continental drug operation. They had checked in their luggage like any other travelers, their faces betraying none of the secrets hidden within their bags. Inside, packed meticulously and sealed to avoid detection, were 22 kilograms of pure cocaine. To them, it wasn't just a substance, it was a future. A payday worth more money than they had ever seen. They boarded their flight to London, confident that the hardest part of the journey was already behind them. But the final act of this operation was the most crucial. The plan was audacious in its simplicity, built on the one thing the criminals knew they could exploit, the human element of airport security. Once Williams and Waldron's flight touched down at Heathrow, they would proceed as normal. They would wait at the baggage carousel, retrieve their specific, pre-identified bags, and walk into the arrivals hall like thousands of other passengers returning home. But their journey wouldn't end there. They were not going to a taxi rank or a bus stop. Their instructions were to find a secluded area, a quiet corner away from the flow of public traffic. There, waiting patiently, would be Junaed Dar. Using his unassailable authority, Dar would meet the couriers, take the bags, and load them into his official airport vehicle. He could then drive a circuitous route, bypassing the very customs and border controls designed to stop this exact crime. His uniform and credentials would act as a magic pass, an invisible cloak of legitimacy that would allow him to transport the drugs out of the airport and hand them over to the final players in the network. Every step was calculated, every move rehearsed. From the moment the bags left the hold of the plane to the moment they were loaded into Dar's vehicle, the entire operation was under the careful, corrupt control of a man who knew the system's weaknesses better than anyone. This wasn't a one-off mistake or a moment of poor judgment. This was a deliberate and premeditated betrayal on a massive scale. Dar had spent years gaining the trust of his employers and the public, all to sell it to the highest bidder. The security uniform he wore was supposed to symbolize protection, but in this case, it was nothing more than a criminal disguise, the cover for a scheme that would have poured millions of pounds of deadly drugs onto the streets of the UK. What the criminals didn't realize, however, was that this perfect plan contained a fatal flaw, a vulnerability they never considered, and the authorities were already preparing to expose it.
What the criminal network, from the couriers in Bogota to the organizers in the West Midlands, didn't know was that their meticulously planned operation was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated performance for an audience of one, the National Crime Agency. For weeks, every move they made had been monitored. Through intercepted communications, undercover surveillance, and a silent partnership with their Colombian counterparts, the NCA had built a picture of the entire conspiracy. They didn't just have a hunch, they had a blueprint. They knew the flight number, the names of the couriers, and the exact bags that carried the illicit cargo. The authorities were presented with a pivotal choice, a strategic dilemma that would define the entire investigation.
They could have arrested Williams and Waldron the moment they checked in, seizing the drugs and ending the plot right there. It would have been a quick, clean bust. But a simple arrest would have only caught the lowest level players. The insider, the critical link at Heathrow, and the masterminds behind the operation would have simply disappeared, ready to launch a new scheme on another day. The NCA saw a bigger opportunity. They chose to let the plot unfold, transforming a simple drug bust into a full-scale covert operation. It was a high-stakes gamble, a decision that would either lead to the complete dismantling of a criminal network or end in a catastrophic failure that could jeopardize the entire case. In a move that sounds like something out of a spy thriller, a team in Bogota intercepted the couriers' bags before they were even loaded onto the plane. They didn't confiscate the cocaine. Instead, they performed a silent, strategic swap. Every block of high-purity cocaine, worth over 2 million pounds, was meticulously replaced with identical blocks of wood. The weight, the feel, even the way the parcels were wrapped, everything was mimicked to perfection. The bags were then resealed and placed back on the flight, carrying the courier's empty victory across the Atlantic. For the next 10 hours, that plane became a ghost ship of a drug run, its cargo a worthless lie, a ticking time bomb of evidence. This was a calculated risk. A single mistake could have led to the couriers discovering the swap, the network going dark, and the entire operation crumbling. But if it worked, it would expose every link in the criminal chain, from the couriers to the organizers, and most importantly, the man on the inside, who was about to betray his profession. The NCA allowed the plane to depart, all eyes on Heathrow. The authorities knew exactly what Dar's next move would be, and they were ready for him. The stage was set. The question wasn't if the plan would go down,
but whether Dar would be caught with the evidence of his own failure in his hands, completely unaware that he was about to be the final victim in a trap that had been set thousands of miles away. The moment of truth arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of a secured airport zone. Inside the vast labyrinth of Heathrow service tunnels and freight bays, Junaed Dar performed the final routine act of his betrayal. He had just loaded the 2 bags, heavy with what he believed was a 2 million pound fortune, into his official airport vehicle. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a rush of confidence. The plan had worked. He was about to drive away, his uniform and credentials his shield, when the silence was shattered by a flood of figures in tactical gear. NCA officers swarmed his vehicle from every direction, their movements precise and their purpose unmistakable. Dar's composure crumbled instantly. The arrogance that had fueled his scheme gave way to a look of utter, dawning horror. He was caught red-handed. It was in that moment, surrounded by the very law enforcement he had so carelessly betrayed, that Dar learned the devastating truth. The officer seized the bags and, with a few quick cuts, revealed the contents to the man himself. There was no cocaine. There were only blocks of worthless wood, a silent monument to his own spectacular failure. His scheme wasn't just foiled, it had been a charade all along, a meticulously crafted trap he had walked directly into. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The plan hadn't failed, it had never been real. This takedown was not a standalone event. It was the final, perfectly timed action of a synchronized, nationwide operation. As Dar was being apprehended in the quiet confines of a secure airport zone, the couriers were also being cornered in the public spaces they thought were safe. Michael Williams and Jessica Waldron, having just completed their supposed mission, were intercepted by Border Force officers as they made their way toward the exits. Their arrest was a swift and decisive end to their role in the conspiracy. They had made it to London, but not a single step beyond the airport's reach. The takedown at Heathrow was the key that unlocked the rest of the criminal network. The confiscated phones from Dar and the couriers were immediately seized and analyzed, providing a direct line to the masterminds of the operation. This crucial evidence led investigators out of the airport and into the suburbs of the West Midlands, where the final arrests were made. In a series of dawn raids, law enforcement teams moved in on the homes of Rutherford Davis and David Farquharson. The two organizers were taken into custody, their encrypted devices seized. The messages they had sent to the couriers, the very instructions for the handover, became the irrefutable proof that linked every single player in the chain together. From the couriers on the ground to the insider at the airport, and finally to the organizers pulling the strings from afar, the entire network was completely and utterly dismantled. When the case finally reached court, the full scale of the conspiracy was laid bare. The judge at Kingston Crown Court described Dar's actions as a gross betrayal of trust, a deliberate abuse of the privilege and power his position afforded him. Prosecutors laid out all the evidence: the seamless surveillance, the clever ruse of the wooden blocks, the intercepted communications, and the confessions of the couriers. The testimony painted a picture of a criminal enterprise that had turned a vital piece of national infrastructure into its personal smuggling route. The sentences handed down were a powerful testament to the severity of the crime. Junaed Dar received the longest sentence, a staggering 16.5 years in prison, a punishment that reflected his calculated abuse of power. The organizers, Davis and Farquharson, who orchestrated the plot from a distance, were each jailed for 14.5 years. And the couriers, Williams and Waldron, who had previously admitted their guilt, were sentenced to 6 years and 8 months each. The entire network had been brought to justice, proving that no matter how sophisticated the scheme, a foundation built on corruption is destined to crumble under the weight of an unrelenting investigation. The case served as a stark warning to anyone considering such a betrayal. The systems put in place to catch you are more powerful than you can ever imagine.
The story of Junaed Dar was a definitive victory for law enforcement, a case that exposed and dismantled an entire criminal network. The arrests and subsequent convictions proved that no matter how sophisticated the scheme, a foundation built on corruption is destined to crumble. But while this particular network was dismantled, the threat it represented did not disappear. It simply changed shape. As investigators celebrated the takedown of the cocaine pipeline, a new and equally chilling operation was already gaining traction. This new plot, however, was not about importing drugs, but about exporting the lifeblood of organized crime, money. Just a few years after the Dar case reached its conclusion, a different kind of conspiracy came to light. The National Crime Agency was once again at Heathrow, but this time the focus was on a husband and wife who were arrested at their home in Putnam, Surrey. The couple, aged 49 and 53, are suspected of being at the center of an intricate plot to smuggle vast sums of criminal cash and high-value items out of the UK. Their alleged method was to corrupt airline staff, the very people meant to ensure a smooth, safe journey for passengers, and use their privileged access to bypass airport security. The scale of this operation is still being uncovered, but the numbers already paint a shocking picture. To date, border forces seized around £150,000 in cash and £100,000 in goods from various airline crew members. These aren't isolated incidents. The seizures are a clear indication of a systemic problem, one that relies on the same fundamental weakness as the Dar case: exploiting the trust placed in those who work behind the scenes. The NCA's senior investigating officer for the case, Barry Venal, made it clear that they are actively seeking out those who aid criminal networks by using their insider knowledge and access to bypass border controls. This new case serves as a chilling, contemporary reminder that the battle against corruption is a never-ending game of cat and mouse. While the Dar network used an insider to bring in drugs, this new network allegedly used insiders to get the profits of crime out. It's a dangerous cycle that shows how vulnerable these critical points of our national security truly are. It's an ongoing investigation, and the ultimate truth of how deep the pipeline goes has yet to be fully revealed. The case stands as proof that for as long as there is money to be made, organized crime will always find a way to corrupt the people we trust to keep us safe.
The cases of Junaed Dar and the recent cash smuggling arrests at Heathrow are two separate stories, but they are both symptoms of the same disease. They prove that no matter how sophisticated our security systems are, they are only as strong as the people who operate them. In both cases, the biggest threat wasn't a clever criminal mastermind from the outside, but a trusted insider who chose to betray their position for personal gain. This leaves us with some serious questions. When you consider the vast damage caused by organized crime, what do you think is a greater threat to our society? The drugs that fuel addiction and violence, or the massive-scale money laundering that allows criminal enterprises to thrive? And when we see how crucial the role of a corrupt insider is, should more be done to vet and monitor the people we trust with our national security at places like our airports? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below. If you were captivated by this chilling look into airport corruption, don't forget to give this video a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the world of true crime.